Rakdos Elementals is the deck from Gerard.
So, Elementals could also be said Skelementals, because this deck is trying to just really punish people with 6/1, haste, trample, sacrifice it on the end of turn cards. This deck even goes as far as to include copies of Ball Lightning, because of how strong that card is with Thunderkin Awakener and with copies of Unearth. You know, we kind of like to joke about older aggro cards like Ball Lightning, but how many of that card do you think a player can realistically beat? Can you beat more than 3 or 4 Ball Lightnings with a reasonable fair game as well?
Yeah, so Ball Lightning, a card I honestly didn't expect to see in Modern at this point. You know, it's kind of a classic of 4th edition red decks, but yeah, is in Gerard's deck as a 3-of. He'll be up against Eldrazi-tron. We start with an Inquisition of Kozilek. Take a look at Dilks' hand. He has 2 copies of Chalice of the Void, a Matter Reshaper, a Mind Stone, 2 lands, and a copy of All Is Dust. So actually, this is a Thoughtseize, so you can take any of them. If there was 1 Chalice, he might take that, but with 2 of them,
yeah, that's the
it's
point.
best to leave them.
Right. Gerard just kind of knows he's likely going to have to play through these Chalice of the Voids. Taking a glance over his list, he doesn't have any... Oh, no, he does have 2 copies of Kolaghan's Command, so there's a not 0 chance he could fight through them, but with only 2 copies, you know, it's probably better for him to just try to fight through rather than blank 1 of them.
Chooses Matter Reshaper there. And a pass back. A value 3/2, a card that actually can be pretty good in this matchup. And now we see Thunderkin Awakener, a 1/2 haste from M20. Right now it's a bit innocuous, but the second part of its text is that combo with Ball Lightning. When it attacks, choose target elemental creature card in your graveyard with toughness less than its toughness, which is 2. Then it enters the battlefield tapped and attacking and sacrifices on the end step.
Huh. I think I've heard that before. What else enters tapped and attacking and sacrifices on the end step?
Yeah. Chalice of the Void on 1 for Dilks. And Gerard.
Miracle Bloodstained Mire.
There you go, right into play. Now, it can't Ball Lightning just yet because he has a basic Swamp in play.
No, I guess he'll have to settle for Ball Lightning.
Wait, how's he going to get Ball Lightning?
What? No, Ball Lightning, you see. There's an old story of someone in the South who one time cast Meddling Mage and said Ball Lightning. And the person the next turn went to cast Ball Lightning. And instead of Blightning.
Oh, wow.
And the person said, no, that's what I said with Meddling Mage. And so there's a rumor, we'll say, that this is a reference to that interaction in Lightning Skelemental being kind of half Ball Lightning, half Blightning.
Lightning Skelemental to play here in an attack. Another one, 6/1. I guess it's kind of both. When it deals combat damage to a player, they discard 2 cards. I like it when an effect in a deck is good enough that you just play a strictly worse copy of the same card.
Oh, yeah. It's all about redundancy. This Elemental stack, it's got a plan. The plan's good. We're sticking to the plan.
Dilks, Walking Ballista on 1 off that Mind Stone. It's ready in case that Awakener tries to bring back the Lightning Elemental. It will do that. And Dilks, before damage, likely to shoot that down. And actually, no, he takes the hit. Goes to 5, discards his last card, which was another Eldrazi Temple.
So the thought here is likely that he would rather just have this Walking Ballista stick around. So next turn, if Fabiano doesn't have anything good in his hand, Dilks could just say, put another counter on this Walking Ballista with its own activated ability and then shoot down the Awakener to cut the problem off permanently.
And that answers the board, provided Gerard has nothing else. But it might be his only line. Thunderkin Awakener showing off here this game.
Dilks has an incredibly interesting decision to make here. So, think of it this way. Fabiano, red-black deck, has a bunch of mana available. if Dilks tries to activate this Ballista at sorcery speed and Fabiano has a removal spell,
He loses.
yeah, Dilks just literally loses the game on the spot. But there is a line he could take where he does just put the one counter on Ballista and shoot down the Skelemental if he thinks buying time is what he wants to do here.
Gerard, another Awakener. This may not give Dilks an option. We'll see. Now, when Thunderkin Awakener attacks, it targets. Let's see what Gerard wants to do. This might actually be enough. I believe Gerard's last card is a copy of Lightning Bolt.
Well, there's a Chalice on one, so
Right. Okay, so
the
just
Bolt
can't
is
do
a
it.
blank.
So a swing with 3 Awakeners from Gerard. Brings back Lightning Skelemental. Dilks' side. So he could put a counter on Ballista and shoot down the Skelemental, go to 2.
That's the only way you stay alive here is if you say put a counter on Ballista and then block an Awakener and then shoot the Skelemental and then just throw one at Fabiano because you might as well, but that's
Right,
really,
because you'd lose the Ballista anyway.
right,
I guess, right, the other option for him is to just shoot the Skelemental.
and take the
And
3
take
and
3.
go to 2.
Yeah,
The big issue there is creating enough blockers on the following turn.
right. Yeah, it's really kicking the can down the road for next turn.
Yeah.
He's going to go for the block. So goes for the safer line. Block, pump, before damage, shoot the Skelemental. And, yeah, the last one just has to go upstairs. Nowhere else for it. If he has land, all is dust. That could keep Dilks alive. It feels like that's the combination he needs.
Right, and he didn't have a land last turn.
Picks up in Urza's Mine. It's Mana Source 7 for Eldrazi spells. It looks like he doesn't have it. Draws a card with Mind Stone at 3, and he will pick up the cards. So we see Thunderkin Awakener getting the job done out of Gerard's Rakdos Elementals deck.
Whenever someone cracks the Mind Stone, you just gotta feel good. You're like, all right, oh yeah, you are down 2 mana and in the exact same spot you were at the beginning of the turn. Let's go.
If you're wondering about the synergies of this Rakdos Elementals deck, it really is about getting back Ball Lightning and Lightning Skelemental. Uses cards like Unearth and Dreadhorde Arcanist to do it as well. But going to the sideboards, so when you already have copies of Unearth in your deck, it turns out these Ball Lightnings aren't the only thing you can unearth. That's pretty good.
Right, Fulminator Mage is what we call a combination with Unearth. You know, can you believe people think Sinkhole is too good for Modern?
That costs 2.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Well, why would I pay double for what I could have for 1 black mana?
Yeah, that's amateur stuff. We're going to the big leagues here and blowing up lands for 1 black mana.
I really like this. You can set up lines. Like, if Fulminator Mage the Graveyard, you can unearth it, blow up a land, attack with Dreadhorde Arcanist, unearth it, blow up a land. That seems fun.
Oh, yeah.
That's totally reasonable.
Oh, yeah. I hope we can assume that Dilks is not going to have a ton of fun with his mono non-basics deck here.
Yeah. Dilks' sideboard has 12 different cards in it.
Well,
A lot
his
of
sideboard
options.
has 5 cards in it.
Right, so a lot of this is actually a wish board for
Right.
Karn the Great Creator.
And there are some things where if you have cards in your main deck that are actively bad, you may end up wanting to take them out for some of the situational Karn cards that you think you'll never actually get with your Karn, but are a better draw step than, you know, we saw how little some cards can do against Fabiano's deck. So if you just want to have, say, a Trinisphere in your deck instead against a pile of cheap, efficient cards, maybe. But
Yeah.
overall, you're just going to be seeing, say, the Leyline of the Voids here, and likely Spatial Contortion, or to try and tag the Awakener.
So Grafdigger's Cage, a card that seems to be pretty good against Gerard's deck, do you think it's better to have for Dilks to have it in his deck or in his sideboard?
That one's pretty tough. I would end up leaning towards, especially on the play, having it in the sideboard because you're more likely to be able to, say, make a Karn the Great Creator and put a Grafdigger's Cage in play before you're dead. Whereas when you're on the draw, you may end up leaning towards going for the Grafdigger's Cage just in your deck, that is. Because, you know, let's face it, it might be too little too late if you're on the draw and you're not doing that until turn 4, turn 5. The damage is done at that point.
Yeah, it would be turn 4 would be the earliest the deck could do it, and that's... I mean, especially with Fulminator Mage X4.
Whoa. Let's not count out a Tron player and their ability to play Mind Tower Power Plant.
Fair enough. You can do whatever you want on turn 3 in the deck.
It could be a boat.
So Star City Games, the sale goes on each week over at our website. You can get different deals on cards. Right now, this last week, we've been doing a sale on HP that's heavily played cards. You can get some cards you need for your deck at some pretty ridiculous prices. Find them at starcitygames.com/sale.
The Japanese back to basics, or not back to basics,
Mind over matter
is hot.
What a card. Totally reasonable resource conversion.
As a matter of fact, I would love to discard a card.
Yeah. Mind over matter is one of those cards that combos with about 1,000 different Magic cards.
Oh yeah, it's one of those things where whenever you see some thread or what have you about, best combos and blah blah blah, you just know it's going to be on the list.
It's gonna be like Mind over matter, Intruder Alarm.
Yeah. Yeah, we get it. Magalhaes the Unhallowed's an unfair Magic card. I'm with you.
That's another one. Like Intruder Alarm goes infinite with, I know.
That is true.
That is true. I don't know what you were gonna say, but I'm sure it's true.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mind over matter. Anything that says tap to draw a card.
It could just be. You could say things that I didn't think were Magic cards, and I would just go, "Oh yeah, I knew that."
Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course, Leafkin Skeleton goes infinite with that. Like, why wouldn't it?
Yeah, probably. Because it probably taps for mana or something,
Kithkin Matron? Yeah, why wouldn't that go infinite with Mind over Matter?
Oh, yeah.
Who doesn't know that? Come on. It's 2019. Get with the times.
Kithkin Matron actually sounds like a pretty good card.
Yeah, I mean, Goblin Matron is a good card. Why wouldn't other Tribal Matron be a good card?
Let's see.
Do you think maybe say it different on Lorwyn? Could be like Kithkin Matron.
What are other cards? Now you got me thinking of cards that sound super sweet. Flamekin Sliver. Or Flame Tongue Sliver. There we go.
Heritage Goblin.
Ooh, here, that's a nice card. Merfolk Spirit Guide.
Ooh. Would you look at that? Tron landed Expedition map. Tale as old as time.
Second Tron piece, and Dilks will have Tron on turn 3. That is, unless something like I guess the Fulminator Mage can't show up if he just has it on turn 3.
Oh yeah, that's the beauty of Tron.
Just have it on the play.
It's like Thanos. It's inevitable.
Inquisition of Kozilek. See, this is the part about Eldrazi Tron that I can never totally get behind. So when you go Tron piece map, Eldrazi Temple.
Well, look, it's
But these things happen. And then you have to think, is your map getting another Eldrazi Temple or is it getting a Tron piece? And it's just unclear.
And here's the problem with Inquisitioning against Tron is now Dilks is set up to rip another Tron piece.
He couldn't have taken it anyway.
I've never wanted it to happen so bad in my life.
Dilks draws Dismember for the turn. 2 mana, makes a Mind Stone. Now with artifacts like Mind Stone.
Theoretically, Fabiano could start unearthing things this turn if he has a Faithless Looting.
You're right, he actually can get a Fulminator Mage into play on turn 2. Faithless Looting, discard it, unearth it. Oh, that's fun. Yeah, he has all the pieces to do that.
Oh yeah. I'm seeing if there's a way that Thunderkin Awakener can bring back.
Faithless Looting. Draws it into Lightning Skelemental. A discard spell. And Thoughtseize. And a Thoughtseize for Gerard.
Once again, 1 p.m. Modern Challenge players. Please find your seats for round number 1.
And back to Gerard we go. So wastes drawn for Dilks. He's waiting on that map until he can find just what he wants it to turn into.
Yeah, and there's also a point where if you can't play the other card in your hand yet, you don't want to risk exposing it to Lightning Scale Elemental. Just go ahead and crack it now. There's only one other card in his hand, so it would feel pretty bad to say play your land for turn, crack, get a land, and then just have to discard the land.
Some other matches on the Legacy table. Gerard's teammate Ryan Phraner takes game 1 with 4-color Delver. Neither player presenting much of a clock just yet here on Modern.
And here we actually see the Elemental set kind of doing a Mardu Pyromancer impression, where even though he doesn't really have any pressure going yet, he's reduced the resources both players have. And now, while he has some breathing room, is flashing back Faithless Looting to kind of sculpt his game plan.
This card's a pair of Lightning Bolts. And Dilks will go searching with Mind Stone. And finds something that makes him want to crack Expedition map. It's going to be for a second Tron piece. He gets Urza's Mine.
And this is the spot where, even if Dilks didn't necessarily draw the tower, this is going to put him up to 5 mana anyway, which you don't really need. You don't have more expensive Eldrazi than that a lot of the time.
Right.
If you expect the game to go long as is.
Yeah, this still casts Reality Smasher. And Thought Not Seer is the card from Dilks. Sees a hand. Lightning Skelemental, Kolaghan's Command, Inquisition of Kozilek, and a land.
See, and here's a spot where people frequently compare Thought Not Seer to a 4/4 with Thoughtseize attached, but this is way better than Thoughtseize because it actually exiles the Lightning Skelemental, which means Fabiano can't recur it.
Right, especially against a deck that has so many ways to recur it. And just another pickup for Gerard. So he's spun through a bunch of his deck with those Faithless Lootings, but at this point is just drawing off the top. Sees Walking Ballista and Dismember off an Inquisition of Kozilek. Feels like he's going to has to take Ballista here.
Yeah, you know, Dismember is way more reactive, and Fabiano just kind of needs to focus on not dying at the moment.
And there's the tower for Dilks. So a good thing for Gerard that he got that Walking Ballista, because a lot of mana is on the way.
Does Dilks have a copy of Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger?
He does not.
Okay.
Now this is interesting. Dilks chose not to play the tower here.
So the big motivation for that is there's a chance that Fabiano, if he plays a Fulminator Mage, he would blow up the Eldrazi Temple rather than one of the Tron lands, because that looks like it knocks Dilks off of something like Reality Smasher. But if you play out your Tron land, then you give Fabiano a more informed decision.
This is actually really interesting because Gerard did draw Fulminator Mage. So he makes the 2/2. And I think you're right, because now he has a decision to make. Does he go after a Tron land now, or does he block Sacrifice? And if he blocks Sacrifices, he's probably going for that Eldrazi Temple.
Yeah.
Is it worth 4 life? And Gerard, he sniffs it out. He blows up the Urza's Mine anyway.
From his side of the table, it looks like it was right in time.
Yeah, but another Thought Not Seer for Dilks means it might not matter. Takes Gerard's last card, attacks him down to 5, and Gerard on his final draw step
Needs to hit some runners here.
Yeah, I don't think he has cards like Dreadbore or Terminate.
No, he has Fatal Push in his deck, and with a Bloodstained Mire, that could have possibly done something.
Yeah, even then that would put him to 4. He'd need a second one, and he doesn't have it. So
Yeah.
all tied up, we go to game 3.
And that game, we kind of saw the power of the Eldrazi-tron deck in its redundancy, right? So the Elementals deck just spins its wheels a ton and has to spend resources making sure its cards line up well against its opponent. It has to use Faithless Looting, for example, to filter through a bunch. Whereas Eldrazi-tron goes, all right, I got a plan. I'm going to play a bunch of medium creatures a little bit ahead of schedule, and they're going to be good enough or they're not.
Yeah, you don't want to get into a top deck war with the Tron deck, and it felt there that both players were searching for something, and Dilks was just able to hit it first.
Right, and Fabiano's deck also tends to lean more reactive than Dilks does. So we saw the 2 Lightning Bolts, all those hand disruption spells, Kolagun's command, all these things that aren't actually very good at killing Dilks, even though Fabiano saw a much larger chunk of his deck. And Dilks really only cast 2-3 spells that mattered that game, but that was enough.
Yeah, the Rakdos Elementals deck's actually interesting. You compared it to Mardu Pyromancer earlier, where it feels more reactive than proactive.
Right, you have these draws like we saw game 1 where you're able to kind of just vomit a bunch of elementals onto the table and get your opponent dead in 3 or 4 turns. But, you know, the more reactive draws are exactly that, in that they aren't going to kill your opponent very quickly.
If you want to find out about the newest decks like Rakdos Elementals, make sure you're subscribed to the Star City Games newsletter. That comes out every week straight to your inbox. It is free to sign up for. You get highlights from our articles. You can when the SCG Tour is coming up and can find IQs. Sign up is for free, starcitygames.com/newsletter. Do you feel that this deck is just a replacement or an upgrade to Mardu Pyromancer?
So the big draw to the Elementals deck over the Pyromancer one is basically playing Skelemental over something like Lingering Souls and what matters in the format right now. So both of those cards are going to suffer a bit against the fast graveyard decks, but Lingering Souls also suffers a bit against some of the other faster decks in general. So if you're not trying to grind or make the game last as long, having something like Skelemental is going to help you to have that more aggressive slant like game 1, which honestly this deck kind of needs to have a mid-range role.
Both players on 7s here for the final game. Dilks' hand. A Tron piece looks like 1 or 2 Eldrazi Temples. Could have an early Thought-Knot Seer or Reality Smasher. Looks like Matter Shaper set up for the second turn.
Well, Fabiano's Inquisition Matter Shaper several times now. Let's see if he does it again.
Yeah, my eyes are on this Rakdos deck to see if he can get one of these engines going, whether it's Dreadhorde Arcanist or Thunderkin Awakener. The deck feels pretty fair until one of those is in play.
Right, and those are so good at snowballing some sort of advantage, and the problem that a card like Matter Reshaper presents is it's able to block them.
You see just how much respect Gerard has for it. Immediately Lightning Bolts the Matter Shaper, and that turns into a Ghost Quarter, so it's going to ramp Dilks one way or another.
Oof.
That actually does a lot of damage. Gerard playing cards like Fulminator Mage in his deck, giving his opponent an extra land, really hurts that strategy.
Yeah, the nice thing about Matter Reshaper in the early turns is generally you're okay hitting a land and you're also okay hitting a spell.
Gerard, it's going to be Lightning Skelemental.
Slam.
Again for the 6-1. So a hit in with the 6-1. If it deals damage, Dilks has to discard 2 cards. And he does. Gemstone Caverns and Urza's Tower. A big hit.
Getting to discard that Gemstone Cavern is nice. It's unfortunate that it looks like it was probably the 8th card he drew on the draw.
4 mana. Make that 2 lands for Thought-Knot Seer. Fatal Push, Unearth, Ball Lightning.
That is a tasteful Ball Lightning.
And Season's Pyromancer. That's the Beatdown?
Beatdown.
Ball lightning? That is nice.
Yeah, that's a nice copy.
And I love this. Thought Not Seer sees the hand, sees a pair of 1-drops, and so Chalice of the Void on 1 is the follow-up for Dilks. Now off the top, Gerard draws another Skelemental, one of his best draws here. Dilks will drop to 8 and lose the remainder of the cards in his hand. Unless he wants to block, but that feels pretty bad. Yeah, Reality Smasher and Karn, the discards. So some pretty impactful discards here.
Right, and Dilks' life total is not high. You know, we talked about it before, but how many ball lightning hits can he survive? Right. He knows there's another one coming.
Right. He knows there's a ball lightning in Gerard's hand. Skelemental may have been the draw he was most scared of there.
Right.
Well, Gerard draws land. He can put Dilks down to 2, but now the question is, where will the last 2 damage come from with a Chalice of the Void in play? Four-turn clock off this Thought Not Seer.
From here, Fabiano is looking at more 6/1 elementals. Thunderkin Awakener is good enough.
Right.
Kolaghan's Command doesn't even need to rebuy the creature. It can just point upstairs at Dilks.
Swing puts Gerard to 10. He's got some live draws. Top card and doesn't even look at it. Gonna slowly push the cards toward it. I believe it was Fulminator Mage, which is a 2/2, so it actually matters here.
That puts Thought Not Seer on defense.
Updates from around. Daryl Ayers wins game 2, pushes Legacy to a 3rd game. And teammate Edgar Magalhaes takes game 1 with the advanced Scapeshift attack.
Unsurprising with those 4-color decks. The Delver deck in particular tends to capitalize on the clunkier draws that the 4-color control deck can have game 1.
Attention Magic players, we're looking for 4 more people to launch our 130 Legacy Challenge.
Do you think he'll miss it? Do you think he'll miss his own chalice trigger?
Depends what you try to unearth, right? If you try to unearth the card that wins the game, then he's going to see it. Maybe... No, I don't think he's going to miss it. Maybe if you try to unearth the Fulminator Mage, it'll work.
Goblin Hero.
Yeah, the 2/2 for 3. Good enough here, though. It is lethal. It puts Gerard ahead in the race. Dilks now will need a draw. He doesn't have one. He has to say go. Gerard draws, and that, I think, is Thunderkin Awakener. If it is, that's going to be the game. It is the 1/2. He's going to cycle and unearth first. And there's Thunderkin Awakener. Moves to attacks. Has to get around something like a Spatial Contortion, but Dilks does not have it. There's the handshake, and it is Gerard Fabiano taking the match 2-1. A streak of ball lightnings, more damage than can be dealt with. Which means we now go to the legacy match between Ryan Phraner and Daryl Ayers. They are on game 3. Daryl now needs to pick up the win to keep the round going.
And the thing that I kind of want to look at in that particular match is how night and day the games where Fabiano was able to find a copy of a 6/1 trample haste creature versus the ones where he couldn't. Just having a way to actually apply pressure while disrupting the opponent is the make or break for these mid-range decks. That's why we still see Tarmogoyf in Jund decks through all of its evolutions in the last half-decade or so.
And specifically the card Lightning Skelemental. I mean, remember that Dilks discarded 4 cards that game to the hits from that 6/1.
Yeah, absolutely. The card's just so powerful.
So for this game, we have 4-color decks on both sides. And I think we're going to see a lot of this in Legacy this weekend, where our typical 3-color Legacy decks now moving into a 4th color so that they can play Wrenn and 6.
Right, the card just does so much when lands are, in a lot of ways, the name of the game. When fetch lands make your Brainstorm better, they make your opponent's Wastelands worse. Obviously, Wrenn and 6 makes your Wastelands better. It goes so far over the top. for a 2-drop.
Right. Game 3 here, both players start off on Ponder and are on 6-card hands. Looking at some of the differences between the decks. Ryan Phraner as a Delver deck has cards like Dreadhorde Arcanist and Tarmogoyf in it.
So, interesting thing about Ayers' version of the list, it looks like he actually has a Snow Slant to fix the mana in his deck, which lets him fetch up basics without getting punished too hard for his 4-color mana base. We see 4 copies of Arkham's Astrolabe in his list.
Exactly, he has 4 of that. No copies of Dread of Winter, just the Astrolabes to fix mana. And now we see Renin 6, the powerful new Planeswalker, already going to work here.
And this is just going to give Phraner such a colossal mana advantage if Ayers doesn't find some sort of solution to it.
Yeah, buying back a fetch land, it's already drawn a card. When your 2-mana Planeswalker has a plus ability that draws a card, that is some pretty powerful stuff. And even if the card is always a land, it doesn't really matter, especially in a format where Brainstorm turns lands into anything.
Speaking of lands...
Daryl doesn't have one.
Oh, yeah.
And in a fair deck matchup, that is a pretty tough spot to be. And now we see Wasteland pairing up with Renin 6. And Daryl might not get to play. We'll see. He does have basic lands in his deck. 3 in total, 1 swamp and 2 islands. So Scalding Tarn the pickup, that can find him another basic land.
See, and after all this has been done, Phraner just drew up to 7, 8 cards in hand?
Right. Right, yes. Planeswalker's drawing him a card every turn.
Yeah, this is just a personal Howling Mine. It's so strong, especially when Legacy decks traditionally kind of cheat on their mana count a bit, or you get to do that because of Ponder and Brainstorm and so on. The fact that you don't have to spend your cantrips hitting your land drops anymore, and you can actually just use them to find gas, has such a subtly strong snowball effect over the course of an entire game.
Renin 6 buys back a land again.
Renin 6 is getting close to ultimate range here.
Yeah, so -7, you get an emblem with instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard have retrace.
Huh, every land you draw for the rest of the game's a Ponder. That's got to be pretty good.
That's not bad.
Do we know how Days works with Retrace?
Ooh.
Are you allowed to both
even
return
if you get
a
it
land
back
and discard the same land? What order do you pay costs for things?
I don't believe you can do that. We have to confirm, but I think you have to have the land in your hand already.
Good news for Daryl here.
Okay. We do see Abrupt Decay finally from Ayers taking care of Renin 6. Now it's drawn Phraner 3 extra cards. He's allowed him to Wasteland one of Daryl's lands. We know there's another Wasteland in Phraner's hand already.
So on the bright side for Ayers, he's not out of this game. His deck does tend to be better at card advantage things, so to speak, than Phraner's is. Phraner has leaned a little bit more into aggression with cards like Tarmogoyf, Delver of Secrets, and so on.
Daryl has Jaces.
Exactly. So if Phraner doesn't have a way to apply pressure at Ayers, it's not wild to think of Ayers clawing his way back into the game and making up this card advantage deficit.
Wasteland takes care of Daryl's Tropical Island. Back down to just black mana. Does still have a basic island. Actually, 2 basic islands in his deck, which he can fetch up. Everything's going to ride on this game 3. On the standard table, Bant Scapeshift in the hands of Edgar Magalhaes was a 2-0 winner.
The deck's so strong, and the Esper Hero deck is not very good at interacting with lands. Yeah,
that's a result I'm not too surprised to see. Tarmogoyf now from Ryan. You mentioned his deck more aggressive, and we see that here. Daryl going to try to answer it. Fatal push on the Tarmogoyf. He has a Wasteland, chooses not to fire it off. Makes sense. Ryan's been drawing extra lands all game. The strategy of knocking him off mana just doesn't seem very likely.
Right, and Ayers actually has a lot of ways to actually just spend colorless mana. So having this just cast things like Plague Engineer, Jace the Mind Sculptor, or even Kolagon's Command or Snapcaster Mage is going to be very strong for him.
Much for Daryl. Even after getting Wastelanded twice, he's hit a high number of lands for the deck. Scalding Tarn fetches up one of his basic islands. And he will ponder. 15 minutes remain in the round. Top card's 2 fetch lands and an Abrupt Decay. Looks like he wants the Decay. Whether he will take a land or crack a fetch before drawing it, we'll see.
Yeah, and this puts him in a spot where he knows he wants the removal spell because he's used to focus on not dying, and eventually he's likely going to come out on top because he has more sources of card advantage. It's whether or not he wants these lands.
Draws into one of them, says go.
And the attractive thing about just having lands is when you have more powerful card advantage engines, having ways to ensure that you're able to cast all your spells, i.e. mana sources, is going to benefit Daryl.
Well, actually, this game's been pretty interesting. It felt like a runaway at the beginning when Ryan was drawing all these extra cards. But I think it's important to talk about what extra cards looked like, because all of Ryan's extra cards were lands.
Right, he didn't actually have much of a use for the fact that he just had a bunch of cardboard.
Right, so now Daryl's trading things. You see Fatal Push for the second Tarmogoyf. And even though Daryl's behind on cards, what that means is Ryan has more lands in play. But I don't see Ryan doing anything with that.
Right, and here we see Ayers kind of sensing some weakness, choosing to shuffle away that second land from the Ponder. Going,
Right.
All right, let's just start finding some card advantage engines.
Right, things seem to be under control.
Exactly. This is the point where he saw Phraner take a turn off,
Right.
and then just jam a Tarmogoyf that Daryl was able to answer uncontested.
Yeah, and Phraner, for example, in his hand, he has a copy of Daze. His deck really isn't set up to have both players having 5 lands in play.
Right.
And he just has to say go. Daryl was under pressure from that Ren and 6. Not too many copies, main deck of ways to deal with it. He has the 2 Abrupt Decays, and that was what he needed to find, but was able to do so, and now cards like Baleful Strix are giving him advantage on the board.
All right, here it comes. This is kind of the start of it, right? This is something that's going to trade for a card no matter what.
Right.
And it also drew a card. This is exactly what Daryl's deck wants to be doing. It's honestly, it may just come down to Daryl needing to kill Phraner in 12 minutes.
Land 7 for Phraner on the battlefield that turn. I believe he has lands 8, 9, 10 in his hand. For a Legacy deck, that's a huge number.
Right.
I do want to talk about how I like Daryl not popping Wasteland this game.
Yeah, big fan of that. It's basically just countering this Daze in Phraner's hand.
Snapcaster Mage from Ayers. Looks like it will be snapcasting a Ponder. Is that enough to get a Red Blast out of Phraner's hand? He has one. And it looks like it is. Trades 1 for 1.
Likely just feels obligated to kind of prevent a 2-for-1 here, right?
Yeah, it's that tradition where he has to prevent the 2 for 1, but Daryl was very happy with that one, with a 1 for 1.
Exactly.
Spell Pierce, the pickup for Phraner. And again, we see him drawing cards that don't go well into the late game.
And we see Phraner choosing to hold some lands, specifically so he can brainstorm them back into his deck and then shuffle them away or grab them with these Scalding Tarns.
Yeah, between Pierce, Daze, extra lands, he really has no shortage of cards that he wants to shuffle back in.
Yeah, this is a spot where Phraner really just needs to get something going.
He does have a copy of Hydroblast in his hand, which is mainly there to answer opposing Ren and 6.
It can also counter copies of Red Elemental Blast, which is one of the best answers to True Name Nemesis.
Right. So we are in a holding pattern. Daryl attacking for 1, both players passing turn, waiting to draw something.
And this is just going to favor the control deck by so much.
As they draw cards, Daryl's cards tend to be more real.
Exactly. Top decks are just better on that side of the table.
And now we see Renin 6 from Daryl. That will get the Hydro Blast. Daryl's not going to fight over that. It's counter. He says go.
Yeah, he's just pretty comfortable saying, all right, fine, spend your relevant cards. I know you don't have that many of them.
Here's one, Delver of Secrets. This late in the game, you figure that Daryl has an answer in his hand. He already has an answer on the board.
Exactly, and if he has something like Plague Engineer, that's going to kill it for free.
2 mana. Second copy of Renin 6. Does this one resolve?
Ooh, speaking of killing for free.
Right, it also +1s to deal a damage to any target. Or -1s, rather. Either way, it can kill the Delver.
Not long for this world, but I actually really like this roll-up here from it.
Right.
That gets it out of Lightning Bolt range. The turn after, he saw Phraner use a Hydro Blast, and typically Legacy decks don't play more than 1, maybe 2 copies of Hydro Blast in their 75.
And now we see the Plague Engineer. For free can kill the Delver. Name's Wizard. And attacks in again with the Strix.
So the drawback is that this could end up hurting Daryl's own copies of Snapcaster Mage, but if the
Right.
Plague Engineer's living, he's got to feel pretty okay about his situation.
It's 3 damage then. We see Dreadhorde Arcanist. The
now
zombie
it can't
wizard
flash back
of
anything.
Dreadhorde Arcanist. Now, unfortunately, a 0/2. It can flash back. It can flash back your Gitaxian probes, right?
No. For a lot of reasons, it cannot do that.
Okay.
Ancestral Vision still on the table.
All right. Now we just have to get one in the graveyard somehow.
I can't believe 4-color Delver made the novice mistake of forgetting to include Stampeding Footfalls in its deck.
Well, that's the make rhinos card,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's the one.
Lay of Old from Daryl continues to push ahead with these value cards.
Dreadhorde Arcanist, he's come to bargain.
There is a Lightning Bolt in Phraner's hand. With Lay of Old on the table, he bolts down the Plague Engineer, so Arcanist back to being a 1/3. Daryl will waste away a land. Renin 6 buys back Wasteland. Daryl plays land for turn. Now on the attack, Phraner can use Arcanist to bolt down Lay of Old.
Right.
The board will trade mostly, except Daryl will draw a card and get to keep his Renin 6.
And Daryl's at the point where he's actually getting to go on the offensive with these Wastelands a little bit here.
Right. Yeah, look, he took Ryan off of black mana with that one. I'm check here what Ryan has for black mana. He has a Underground Sea, it looks like, left in his deck that he can fetch up.
Right, and that is the only thing. After that, he can no longer cast Abrupt Decay. He can no longer cast Plague Engineers of his own, or if he has Diabolic Edict in his deck. That one's a little bit less likely.
He might have Thoughtseize in his deck. However, this late in the game, I don't think it's a card he really would want.
Right.
If it's even in.
It's mostly just Daryl trying to cover his bases and get the bits of value where he can.
Abrupt Decay takes care of the Arcanist before attacks. No Lightning Bolts. Daryl would like to hang on to Lay of Old, and Ryan knows there is no coming back from that. He extends the hand, and with the comeback there, Daryl, after being behind a Renin 6 for most of the early turns of the game, does turn the corner, and his control deck takes the win 2-1. And
that's kind of the power of those 4-color decks that you'll see, is even though it felt like he was so behind, he was able to just answer that one card advantage engine that Phraner was able to present, and then from there, just kind of snowballed an advantage in a way that Phraner couldn't keep up with because he didn't have any source of card advantage or damage on his side of the table.
Yeah, well, we know